Kansas teens will most likely do worse on the ACT this year, and that's a good thing. Plus, new ways for the state to catch criminals passing fake bills. And a Kansas lawmaker backs out of support for an anti-LGBTQ bill after his daughter takes him to task on social media. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. This is Kansas Week, and I'm Pilar Pedraza. We begin today with a story that's just been developing in the last few hours on Friday, as a Wyandotte County judge has dismissed all charges in the criminal case involving the death of 10-year-old Caleb Schwab on the Schlitterbahn, a water park ride in Kansas City. You may remember this case from about a year and a half ago. Caleb Schwab is the son of state legislator at that time, Scott Schwab, now the Kansas Secretary of State. The judge said that he was dismissing all the charges in this case because the Attorney General showed improper evidence to the grand jury to get the indictment. He said that that evidence could not be used in a criminal trial and that it irreparably tainted the jury. Now, the Attorney General says that he respectfully disagrees and is now looking into what the next step is to continue with this case, indicating that this is not the end of the criminal case involving the death of Caleb Schwab. Now, this has been a very busy week and just one of the many topics that we're going to be discussing today. Here to help me with that, we have Jim Howell, Republican Sedgwick County Commissioner, and we have Suzanne Tobias, the new opinion editor at the Wichita Eagle. Same name, new job. That's right. And also Representative Elizabeth Bishop, Democrat from Wichita in the Kansas House. Thank you all so much for joining me. Now, we were discussing this actually even before the show began, and this is definitely a case that hit lawmakers very hard when it happened. Many of them were there. I believe you were among them, Elizabeth, when Caleb died. It was something that really hit the body very difficult.
It was legislative day at the water park. I was not there at the time. This was just before I was elected to the legislature, but it was very traumatic for the entire legislature, and it continued to be as we looked at new regulations and new laws, new statutes relative to amusement parks. It's made a change all across the state.
Yeah, and certainly made some changes, but it surprised, I think, most of us, this dismissal. We really expected it to go to trial. I don't even know where to go with that.
Well, I don't think it's a dead end. I guess what I understand is, Attorney General Schmidt is going to continue looking at this case, and I think he'll do whatever's needed to start the process back up again. But I just say it's a kind of a shocking outcome today. Many of us do know Scott Schwab personally. We followed the story because it's such a tragic way that poor little Caleb passed, and so we want some accountability. And I think there's were obviously mistakes made that I think are criminal in nature. This needs to be fully taken to the end in a criminal attempt to see what has been done wrongly, and so that hopefully this will never happen again.
Yeah, that's the goal here, I think, is, you're right, accountability, and that's what the public would like as well, I think. And what you want to know when you go to a park or any place like that where children are is that they're going to be safe. So,
and I think I agree with you. I think that's part of why this hit us so much, is that 10-year-old child could have been any of our children. And everybody stopped and said, wait a minute, if it could be him, it could be my child.
And if it can be there, can it be anywhere? I mean, that's the question. Or was there something specific there that was criminal? No. All right. Well, one of the things we're going to have to wait and find out, I guess, to see where the Attorney General decides this goes next.
Absolutely.
And certainly, as I said, lots of stuff happening at the State House this week. Very busy with a lot of bills working their way through the system as the clock ticks down. A series of bills that would curtail LGBTQ marriage rights and add a fee for internet access to porn seems to be what's getting the most attention right now. 3 bills filed last week sparked international headlines, deriding Kansas for calling LGBTQ marriages parodies and equating homosexuality to a religion, among other things. All sourced to a single man, Chris Sevier. Representative Randy Garber told the Wichita Eagle he agreed to sponsor the bills after Sevier lobbied him. Sevier has a colorful history. He tried to marry his laptop and sued Apple for the porn addiction he says ruined his marriage. A Tennessee court barred Sevier from practicing law there, saying he was incapacitated by reason of mental infirmity or illness. Thursday, the Missouri State Capitol labeled him a security concern. Garber told the Eagle he was unaware of Sevier's history, then added, "I try not to judge people on what's happened in their past." Garber got several lawmakers to co-sponsor the bills, including Representative Ron Hyland, whose daughter is active in the LGBTQ community in Kansas City. She took to social media Thursday to call him out on that decision, sharing a letter she'd written to Hyland asking him for an apology and saying, "I cannot condone your actions. Shame on you." A short time later, the Manhattan Mercury reported Hyland was asking to have his name removed, saying it contains some hateful language which I do not condone, and it is against our Lord's command to love our neighbors. And this is certainly a story that's been kind of raising eyebrows over the last week, and these last couple of days of developments have just added to that aspect. One thing that really seemed to come out is that it didn't seem like lawmakers were really reading the bills when they signed on as co-sponsors. That was certainly the implication that you get when you read Ron Hyland's statement in the Mercury Manhattan. And you kind of wrote about that a little bit on the opinion page.
Right, there were several stunning things about this move, I think. One being the bills themselves being just really extreme. And then sourced to this person who's been rebuffed in several states and shown to be, a security threat now in the Missouri State House. But you're right. I mean, this idea that, and I'm sure it happens more than we think, where lawmakers will sign their name to a bill because they know the legislator that's introducing it, or because they, sort of agree with it in concept. But, I have to say, this is actually progress in the legislature, because a bill like that could have been submitted anonymously in the past. So at least we know who's behind it this time.
And that has made a huge difference, at least in my ability to cover what's going on at the State House. I can now look up and find out where a bill came from, which you didn't used to be able to do. Yeah.
Well, I actually know Ron Hyland. I know Randy Garber. They're very passionate, good legislators. But to the point, there's no such thing as anonymous bills any longer. And you used to be able to sponsor a bill. Your name would go at the top of the bill, and if the bill went in a direction you didn't like, or something was in that bill that you found out later on that you didn't like, you can't take your name off that bill. It's there permanently, which I guess is going to be a way. It's going to probably cause people to think twice about putting their name on bills at this point, because what's in that bill, if you don't agree with everything that's in there, your name's going to be associated with that bill. I think that's the issue with Ron Hyland right now. He would like to see his name removed, and I think Cheryl Helmer is the same way. She's actually come out publicly and said she wants her name removed from the bill, but that's not part of the process. I checked the other day, and their names are still part of the title of that bill. Yeah. So it is what, I think that's really kind of the point of this discussion today is, number one, are the legislators actually reading the bills? And do they agree with everything that's in there as a starting point? Maybe not, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I think even Randy Garber himself actually regrets some of the controversy this has caused. I think that this is not language that he even supports himself. I think his heart may have been right, but this didn't turn out the way he thought it was going to turn out.
Yeah.
I believe that the chairman of the Federal and State Affairs Committee has said that they will not be worked. These bills are, for all intents and purposes, dead. I will say that the daughter's Facebook post was very touching, and she did go on to talk about the fact that one of the things that hurt the most was the fact that the values that she has for having concern for your fellow citizens and approaching our neighbors with care and concern were values that her father had taught her. And I thought that it was very touching. It was the kind of blog post where you don't have a dry eye once you finished reading it. And I know Ron Hyland also, and I know this has been extremely painful for him.
That whole episode was a stunning development, I thought, when you have the daughter come out and really call her father on a policy that she disagrees with, a stance that she feels strongly about, and then to see him come back and say, you're right. I think that's kind of refreshing, actually.
Well, what I think it does is it brings our fellow citizens out of the shadows and says, when we do things like this, this is the hurt we cause. And it makes it very visible and palpable.
Yeah, it's much easier to recognize what's happening when you can actually look that person in the face than when it's a faceless name and statistic. So, all right. Well, if that bill's not moving on, we're going to move on. The hottest debate this week was likely that surrounding a bill that would bypass the Affordable Care Act in offering a form of insurance. After several hours of debate, the Kansas Senate finally approved a bill this week that would allow the Farm Bureau to offer a form of health care to its 42,000 members for about 30% less than the premiums of comparable health insurance plans. Since it's not health insurance per se, it would allow the Farm Bureau to sidestep state and federal regulations. That means the Farm Bureau could ban things like pre-existing conditions from its coverage. Supporters say the plan provides Kansans with more options. Opponents say it's an in-run around rules in place to help all Kansans. And I know a lot of folks who support Medicaid expansion actively opposed this bill, but there were also a lot, as we watched the debate going on, who supported the bill and said, yeah, we need to move forward with this bill, but that doesn't mean we're against Medicaid expansion, made that very clear as they wanted it noted in the record with their vote. So it becomes a question, is this bill really an in-run around Medicaid expansion, as some are saying, or is it just kind of filling a gap that exists right now? Elizabeth?
Well, the administration, federal administration, issued an executive order having to do with ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, and said that there can be what are called AHPs, Association Health Plans, and a couple of different types of those, short-term, limited duration plans, and so forth. I serve on the insurance committee, and when we had our very first meeting, we were hit with something like 12 bills, all of which relate to this issue. It is a very complex issue. There are a lot of different moving parts, and the impact is going to be also complex, and it could be extreme. And I believe what we really need to do is back up, take a look at all of these issues. It's an attempt to address a serious problem, which is the difficulty of small businesses, self-employed persons, to find adequate, affordable, accessible insurance. And that's a very serious issue and needs to be addressed. All of this is much too much. There are some provisions in there that I think are really off the mark. And what I would like to see happen, truthfully, is an interim study session through the summer to take a look at what all the impact is. It is going to destabilize the health insurance industry in this state, and it's going to have a serious impact. And we need to address the serious issue that it attempts to solve, but do so in a planful, fully informed way with lots of opportunities for citizens to weigh in.
Yeah.
Disagree. This is an issue of freedom and personal responsibility. If these farmers in the Farm Bureau have a product that they like, they want to do this, why should the state stand between them and the thing that they want? This is not hurting anybody else. This is a small part of our state, 42,000 members is what we're talking about. We have 3 million people. They have something that they have put together that they like, they want to do this. Why should we not let them do that? I don't see that. This is actually an issue of free market versus government regulation. I think we ought to let the free market do its job.
But it's also a workaround. It's a clear workaround of ACA. I mean, and because of the Farm Bureau and the pull it has, particularly in rural Kansas, this bill was seriously considered and it seems to be going forward. But the impact, as Elizabeth stated, is going to be on all citizens, and including ones that have different insurance, because if then the impact on the insurance companies, they're going to have people with pre-existing conditions possibly who cannot be covered under this non-insurance insurance. I think the regulations are there for a reason, and it's to protect the whole system.
Well, there are several plans. The one that the Farm Bureau has put forward is not just for what we think of as Farm Bureau members. Anybody in the state could pay their $50, become a member of the Farm Bureau, whether or not they're in a business that's related to agriculture, and be part of this plan. One of the things that it will do is create an excellent insurance plan for healthy people. It totally is an in-run around the ban on pre-existing conditions exclusions, and it is individually rated. Therefore, you can go into the plan as a healthy person and find it really meets your needs, get sick, get a degenerative disease, have a serious accident, and discover that as the plan renews from year to year, you are being priced out of it, and have to then turn to another plan such as the ACA, which will be crumbling because of all of the really sick people being diverted in that direction, and we have hampered and maybe irretrievably injured our entire health care system.
And to clarify, the ACA was designed to help balance out the number of healthy people and the number of people with serious medical issues, so that we're kind of sharing the load a little bit, as opposed to just those who have serious medical issues shouldering the entire burden, because the idea is that keeping the entire populace healthy is better economics for the state and the country. That's the concept behind it, whether you agree with it or not, how it worked out. That's the concept.
But where are we right now? The Affordable Care Act is unaffordable, but for so many people, if you have reasonable, modest middle income to your family, it is so expensive that it's not really affordable. So we're trying to solve a problem that the government, frankly, made things worse. And what we had before was competition in the medical market. We had all kinds of products available, and the prices were better. What we have right now is limited availability to insurance products, and the prices are going up. So I think right now, by seeing additional competition and additional products in the market, should drive the price back down again. If they want to see competition, the way to do that is to actually bring the prices down so that people can stay in the other products out there, other than just being forced into a single payer solution.
Since the Farm Bureau proposal is defined as non-insurance, it will not be under the purview or have any accountability to the Kansas Department of Insurance. How it would be made accountable at this point, we do not know. I understand that it has passed the Senate, has been read in on the House, and has been referred to the Insurance Committee, so I will get the opportunity to find out. I do believe that if you are a member of this plan and you have a serious problem with it, you should be able to pick up the phone and call the Kansas Insurance Department. They will have no ability to do anything with your concern.
So
okay, and I'm going to have to give Elizabeth the last word on this one, because we've got some other things to talk about. Very fascinating debate. Thank you both so much. A plan to make up a skipped payment to the state's pension capers is on its way to the governor's desk this weekend. But will she sign it? In a financial crisis, the Kansas legislature skipped a 2016 payment to the state's pension plan in order to save money. In 2018, it skipped the makeup payment. This year, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle say it's time to make good on their promises and hand over the $115 million needed to get caught up on capers' payments. Despite some concern over whether Kansas can really afford to make the payment this year, leading Democrats joined Republicans in approving the Republican-written legislation. All right, so one of the many issues that's going on there with capers, well, two main things really, is the question of getting the state caught up on what it owes to employees. And the other is the question of the reamortization, which is not part of this bill, but has become a big deal in the debate at the state level. And I know as we were watching that, you had some thoughts you wanted to share.
I don't care if Governor Kelly signs this bill or not. It was unanimous in the House and Senate. It is going without changes, not to conference committee, but straight to the governor's desk. She can sign it if she wants, but in 10 days it's going to become law anyway. I think she'll sign this bill, obviously. I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat. This makes sense. They skipped this $90 million payment back in 2016, and now it's $115 million to make that up. Look, let's get this capers thing fixed. I would like to just reflect on the fact that back in 2012, under Brownback, we passed House Bill 2032, that in 20 years we get our state pension program back to 80% funded. And right now we're only about 61% funded. So this needs to be done. And this idea of reamortization subject, I'd like to see the governor lead on this and getting our capers program back where it should be. Brownback did a good job. I think Parkinson and Sebelius actually did the wrong thing. Money was tight back then. They actually made things worse by not making statutory payments. And Brownback didn't not just make statutory payments, but made make-up payments to get our system back to solvency, 80% funded by 2032. That's what this $90 million was for. And the state, frankly, failed by not making the $90 million payment in 2016. We're going to fix it this year. We have $900 million surplus. Let's do the right thing and make that unfunded liability back on track again. So this is the right thing to do, obviously.
Well, and I know as I was listening to some of the debate, there were those who were a little uncomfortable with spending the money simply because they were uncertain about where the state's finances stood right now, especially with the last month coming in below expectations. But in the end, you're right. They did agree that it needed to happen. And I know you were there for some of that debate, Elizabeth.
Yes, I was. And one of the things that I noticed is that it was the right thing to do, but possibly in the wrong way. I believe that reamortization will have to be considered at some point. It's one of those rules within the way that the CAPERS is set up and the way the board operates that has to actually be considered at least every 2 to 3 years. And the system is still relatively unstable. 61% is way too low. And this is a good big drop in the bucket, but there are basic issues that still need to be, structural issues that still need to be resolved.
All right. Well, we'll keep chipping away at it, I'm sure, is what the state's plan is, and we'll see where it goes. And as we look at that, there are some other things that are happening. The state has a new way to fight back against counterfeiting. And KSN's John Acebus takes a look for us.
It seems like there's been a big rash of it happening, and every other day somebody's reporting something about somebody getting fake money.
Whether it's a 10, a 20, or more, Phong Nguyen will be the first to tell you.
We got a fake $100 bill at one of our grocery stores the other day.
Look closer at this $100 bill.
It literally said for motion picture purposes only. You kind of want to question whether they know how to read English or not.
That was at another business Nguyen works at. Here at Super Laundry, he suspects several people have tried passing out the fake cash this week alone.
Legally, you can confiscate that bill and report it to the police and have the police come pick it up.
But all too often, he says they lose.
Every dollar counts, every penny counts.
Usually, he says all they can do is report the crime and hope for the best.
Before it was pretty helpless. You either confiscate it and kind of explain to them what the repercussions of passing fake money.
But a new Kansas law now allows local police and state agencies to arrest and charge for counterfeit currency with the intent to defraud, a felony level charge.
That's a great thing. Hopefully that's a great deterrent, and if the word gets out that if people are being arrested for passing out fake money, hopefully that slows down things a little bit and prevents people from actually trying.
Phong believes this new law will help him see less fake bills like these.
The more people they can bust, the better.
Well, and certainly I know I've done my fair share of counterfeiting stories over the years. Counterfeiting is a big hit to the local economy, and I know that that's one thing that all three of us, all four of us, all three of you have talked about over the months and years. Do you have any idea, Jim, how much of a chunk that impact is on Sedgwick County?
You know, I actually don't have any numbers to say how big of an issue it is, but this story did say it was 149 cases just in the last year. Since July 1st of last year, 149 cases have been reported to the Wichita police, and so clearly this is a pretty big deal. And those that are receiving those fake bills, they're just out the money. Most times they're not recompensed. They don't get the money back in any way. They're just
no
the loser.
Insurance or anything for it.
I do appreciate the language of the bill, though, because it does talk about intent to defraud or intent to do this. In other words, the person who's passing the money, if they knowingly have fake counterfeit bills and they're trying to pass it off, this is where the charges come alive. And so I think the bill was really well written. It was absolutely necessary. And I'm sorry for those that are losing in this community. I'm glad that the police actually have tools now. They need to help stop the people who are making this happen.
This is one of those new laws that's like, you mean it wasn't a law before?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, but obviously this is going to give local police a chance to really get at that and possibly give the business owners more.
Yeah. Well, and it's usually a local problem. Somebody just passing a few bad bills that they've made on their own, not some big federal conspiracy. All right, so we have one more thing to talk about, and I'm going to test you guys on it later. That's because Kansas is now paying for all juniors to take the ACT, a college entrance exam, but it could mean lower scores in the state. As part of the new school finance plan, the state of Kansas is paying for all high school juniors to take the ACT this year, a standardized exam used by most colleges as an entrance exam. It levels the playing field for some students who couldn't afford to take the test on their own and might now qualify for scholarships and even consider college if they hadn't already. In Wichita alone, the number of students taking the ACT jumped from 1,500 last year to some 4,000 this year. But with all juniors taking it instead of just the academically elite, Kansas can expect its average score to drop. That's what happened in both Nebraska and Missouri in recent years when they had all students take the exam. Both saw their state's average score fall below the national average. And to be clear, those numbers were based on an article from the Wichita Eagle that you had a large part in. I know you spent years covering education before you moved over to the opinion desk. Right. For those of us who've been involved in education, not a big surprise that the score would drop when the numbers taking the test go up.
Right. I mean, the same thing happens with AP tests. Anytime you diversify and increase the pool of people taking a test, the average score is going to go down. Now, so on this week, earlier this week, 35,000 Kansas students took the test in one day.
Wow.
That is fantastic for those students, particularly the ones. Now, there are waivers. There are ways to take the ACT test if you're in poverty. You can get a waiver, but just to be the person, with whose parents might not, know to sign you up for it, to take you to school on that Saturday to take the test. There's a lot of students that are going to be able to take the test this way with the state paying it, and that's a great thing. But just a warning to state lawmakers and policymakers and parents that yes, it's very likely that Kansas's average score will go down.
Well, and certainly, that was an extra bit out of the state's pocket to pay for it. School funding is still a big issue that is kind of looming over lawmakers right now, Elizabeth.
That's true. And I think we're going to have to start getting serious about it. So far, it's really been very quiet. We're coming up to turnaround, so all of those bills that relate to education need to be moving now. However, most of the action is in the K-12 Budget Committee, and that's a slightly different committee and is working on all of the different budget issues. The controversy has been, are we going to start from scratch and plan everything all over again, and including, how much goes for autism services, and, do all that again when we did that last year and we worked on it hard in 2017? I hope not. I hope we'll concentrate on the numbers.
It will be very difficult to start from scratch considering the schedule that is ahead. We've got a deadline from the Supreme Court and they have to have that done by April. Exactly. We also have a deadline in the show and we're running up against it. Jim, Suzanne, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me. I've appreciated your conversation today. I hope you have enjoyed what we've had to say here. We'd love to hear from you. All you have to do is email us at kansasweek@kpts.org. For now, have a great week.